Hi all, this is Jake Freeze giving my astronomy presentation for my final. I just wanted to give a little brief introduction as to what we're going to be covering in this assignment. We're going to be going over the solar system, just because it's something that's always been really intriguing to me. I think just to know like what else is out there in the world, and also like I think everybody's probably at one point wondered what is out there behind the clouds and out of the universe. And I think like everybody's probably looked at astronauts and been amazed at what they're able to do. So I wanted to focus on kind of like the overview of each planet, some famous scientists. Then I wanted to tell about why the solar system is important and just what makes these planets unique and things like that. So for some key vocabulary, I wanted to go over just three terms that I think are important for everyone to know before this presentation begins. So a gas giant. This is a giant planet composed of hydrogen and helium. Two of the planets that it would be is Jupiter and Saturn. So these are planets that are basically composed of gases as opposed to terrestrial planets, which are mainly rock planets. The second definition would be ice planet. This is just a planet with an icy surface, typically made up of gases and such like that. And then as I covered briefly a little bit ago, terrestrial planet. This would be a planet that contains mainly rocky materials, which would be Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Why is this presentation important? Why is the solar system important? Well, in my opinion, the solar system is important basically because it's like made up of everything that is around the sun, and it's like how we are living on Earth right now. You know, without the planets, I mean, we wouldn't even be here. So it doesn't make sense to just ignore and not want to learn more about kind of where we came from and things like that. The solar system is also made up of comets, asteroids, and other gases. So this would be a lot of things that could obviously harm like a planet, which is why I'll show you later in the video, Earth is very unique because it has a way to kind of remedy this situation. And then the last point would be that everything orbits the sun. Without the planets, there's nothing really that can orbit the sun. So this is a view of our solar system. I found this to be really awesome just when I was kind of looking at some pictures online of what it looks like. I mean, we look at Mercury and Mars. Just look at how small those two planets are. They're insanely small. You can barely even see them. But then you look at Jupiter and Saturn, and they're just overwhelmingly huge. I think, like, look at how small Earth is. It's crazy to think it's that small because we live in such a huge world. And it just shows what else is out there within our solar system. So I wanted to just give the introduction of the planets. For those of you that don't know the planets, I wasn't entirely sure on all of the planets either. We have Mercury, Jupiter, Earth, Mars, Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, and Venus. And in the blue blob, I had Pluto was once considered a planet. It is not any longer. So that was something I had to check on because I wasn't entirely sure of. But that is something that a lot of people get confused with how many planets there actually are. So I thought that this was really awesome, being able to review all these planets. So this is going to be how our format's going to look like, where we're just going to list the name. I'm going to list the name of the planet and give you a brief overview of what makes these planets important and what they're all about. So Jupiter is the largest planet in our solar system, as you could tell in a couple slides ago in the map or the diagram. It's made up of mostly gases instead of solids. So that's where it really differs from Earth. It's the second brightest planet from Earth, so I had the yellow background just to kind of symbolize how bright it was. A fun fact was Jupiter was named after Greek gods in Rome. This is actually a fun fact for just about every planet except for Earth. The fun fact for Earth would be that Earth was the only planet that was not named after a Greek god or something relating to the Greeks in Rome. Otherwise, every other planet came from that type of source. I thought that was really awesome. And then here we see the gas giant planet, which is what we went over earlier. That's what Jupiter is called. And the gases cause it to be very windy. The last part of this is that the winds can range up to 400 miles per hour. I thought that this was something that was like super incredible. Just like it's crazy to think that it can be that windy on a planet. Obviously, there's no life on that planet because it's made up of mostly gases, and nothing or anything can withstand winds that are that high. Here's a close-up picture of Jupiter. The next planet we're going to get into is Mercury. Mercury is the smallest planet in our solar system. It is one of the terrestrial planets, along with Earth and others. It has a rough, rocky, and solid surface, so this is where the terrestrial part comes into it. It's made up of mostly rocky material. One of the interesting things that I felt it was important to note about Mercury is that the temperature changes all the time, and it ranges from 800 to negative 120 degrees. So you can just think, like, how could anything withstand something that was that hot or that cold? It's why there hasn't been any life on Mercury. And then a fun fact would be standing on Mercury, the sun appears 3 times bigger than it would if you're standing on Earth. So that's another really interesting part of Mercury. And then, despite the fact that it's 800 degrees, it isn't even the hottest planet in the sun or the solar system. So that is pretty crazy to think about when we're looking at all these planets. Now on to our planet, which is Earth. My favorite, and I'm sure yours. Earth is the biggest of the terrestrial planets. It's the only planet with human life. That's what really makes Earth unique. Also, I think another thing that makes it unique that not a lot of people really like to state is that it's one of the only planets that's covered with water, and we are covered mostly with water. So that shows just like how different it is compared to all these others that have gases or even the rocky materials. They don't have water on those. And our planet's easy to breathe because it contains mainly nitrogen. So we're 78% nitrogen, so that's why, despite the gases being on Earth, we are able to breathe because it's nitrogen. And then here's where I was talking earlier about how I was going to allude to this. The atmosphere protects us from meteoroids and asteroids. So those asteroids and meteoroids that are in the solar system, when they come crashing near Earth, as soon as they were to hit the Earth's atmosphere, they would immediately crumble and just not vanish, but they would crumble and kind of disintegrate a little bit. So I thought that was something that was extremely interesting about Earth. Mars is the 4th planet from the Sun. In order to orbit the Sun, it takes about 687 days, which is almost 2 times as long as it takes our planet Earth. So I thought that was extremely interesting. Mars is mostly made up of a very rocky surface that has become rocky because of volcanoes, rapid winds, chemical reactions, and also different gravitational pulls and shifts on its surface. So that's why this would be another one of the terrestrial planets, because it's just been caused by everything that I just named. And then one interesting thing that I thought was important to know is that there's 2 moons named Phobos and Deimos on it, and it is one of the only planets that does have more than 1 moon. Neptune. Neptune is a giant planet that's about 4 times bigger than the Earth. This is what we were talking about, how crazy it is to think that there's a planet that could be 4 times bigger than the one that we live on. I thought that was something really insanely crazy to think about. This planet is an ice giant which contains dense icy material such as water and methane. The reason that this planet is blue is mainly because it is so cold, but it also contains methane, and it contains a lot of icy gases. So that's something I didn't put here on this slide, but that's one of the neat parts about Neptune. And as I said there, it's made up of mostly gases. It is the windiest planet at speeds of up to 1,200 miles per hour. So this is one of the reasons that life can exist on this planet, because there wouldn't be any way to hold it. The winds are they create such a gravitational shift, and they're so rapid that it's very hard to hold anything. And it's the furthest planet from the sun, so it's very, very cold there. I believe it's one of the coldest planets we have in our solar system, if not the coldest. Saturn, this is one that's a lot of people's favorites because of the major amounts of rings on it. It's the second largest planet. It is surrounded by 53 confirmed and 9 provisional moons. So it has got a ton of extra moons. Like I said, this is one of the only planets that, one of a couple planets that have more than one moon on it. This is also made up of mostly gases, made up of hydrogen and helium. And so within the rings, it contains 7 different rings. And there are several big gaps between them. This is what a lot of people say makes Saturn so unique compared to a lot of these other planets, because of the different rings that they have around them. And Saturn cannot hold life. However, some of the moons, they feel, have the characteristics and attributes to one day potentially hold life. So that's something that I think, in the future, maybe in the next 100 years, who knows, we may see some life on some of the the moons that surround Saturn. Uranus, this was actually one that I really enjoyed learning about. Uranus is very cold and very windy. It was something that many people don't know and that I didn't know, is it's the first planet to be seen by a telescope. It's also an ice giant, which is made up of gases with a little bit of water. It contains a lot of methane, so methane gives it the blue color that it has. It's got a really pretty light bluish aqua color to it. And it's nicknamed the sideways planet because Uranus rotates on its side. So when it rotates east to west, instead of rotating in orbit within what would be a circular motion, it kind of turns on its side and it rotates east to west on its side. So I thought that was something that was really interesting about this planet and just kind of really fascinated me. Venus is the closest planet to Earth. It's known as the neighbor planet. Its thick atmosphere creates a greenhouse effect. So all the gases that create the massive amounts of heat all create that greenhouse effect. The volcanic landscape features high mountains and really rough terrain. So it's something that I don't really see how anybody would live on there, and it's just made up of just a lot of really tough material. It is the hottest planet, so again, going back to earlier, it can get up, it's around 900 degrees all the time. So it doesn't go to it doesn't have massive temp swings. It's around 900 degrees all the time. And it's so windy that it causes the clouds inside the planet to rotate every 5 days from their circular motion. So I thought that was something that was really interesting. And like I said, there hasn't been any life on Venus, and I highly doubt there ever will be. So since we just covered what makes each planet what it is, I kind of wanted to look at what makes the planets unique. So Hot and cold. Mercury, as I said, ranges from 800 degrees to negative 279. That's really what distinguishes Mercury from all these other planets, is the massive weather changes and temp changes. The greenhouse effect is directly related to Venus because it's made up of carbon dioxide and sulfuric acid and can reach up to 900 degrees. Mars, which features a really red derived color, comes from the rust that's in the soil. So we call this the rusty planet. I had no clue why there was red on that planet. So it's from the rust that makes up that planet. Earth is the only planet that contains human life. That's pretty self-explanatory. Jupiter is the largest of the planets, so we call it the solar system king. Saturn offers a complex ring system that's about a mile thick, so it's nicknamed the ring. As we went over, Uranus is nicknamed the sideways planet due to its rotation. And Neptune is extremely cold because of the distance from the sun, so we tend to refer to it as the way out there planet. So the last part of this that I kind of wanted to talk about was some famous astronomers that really help relate, that I had a chance to look at, that are related to the solar system. So Johannes Kepler, he determined that the planets travel around the sun in eclipses instead of circles. Before, everybody thought that they traveled in circles. He was able to use testing to determine that they rotate in ellipses. And he also created 3 laws involving motion of planets which are used in today's calculations in astronomy, as we went over throughout this class. Giovanni Cassini measured how long it took Jupiter and Mars to rotate. He also was honored by NASA because NASA sent out a satellite around Mars, and they nicknamed it the Cassini in honor of him. So I thought that was something that was really interesting. So he obviously had a really huge effect on some of their studies. Sir Isaac Newton, really famous scientist, most famous for his laws of gravity, created laws describing motion of forces between the objects. I think everybody pretty much knows who Sir Isaac Newton is. And then lastly, Stephen Hawking was famous for his ideas on cosmology. So he proposed that the universe has a beginning and eventually it will have an end as well. So he also wrote books that seek to educate us about the world that we live in instead of just taking for granted everything that we know. So this was basically just everything in a nutshell. All about the planets. I thought that, the planets were very interesting. It was something that always interested me. And I hope that you guys can hopefully see how awesome the planets are. And I hope you guys enjoyed this presentation.